Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phoebe Kagame from M-Shule. Thank you very much for joining M-Shule and Africa Storybooks. Today, which also marks our World Literacy Day, as we delve into our theme, using storytelling to unlock literacy development and build a reading culture. From the submission of topics or areas of interest that we got from you, we certainly got the impression that we are all looking forward to this session, and it is evident that we want to learn how best to support our children and the society through tackling underlying challenges. Some of the challenges or areas where the attendees or you as the attendees shared that you want to learn from is accessing reading materials, adapting stories digitally, equipping educators with resources to consistently support children, or storytelling virtually. Our panelists today are Sara Cohen and Dorcas Wepukhulu. Both Sara and Dorcas have experience working with communities to support development of and building reading cultures through different media. They will address the points that you raised as you registered for this session, and this will be sorted in the discussions. So before I hand the session over to Sara, who will be moderating this webinar, I would like to go over the house rules. So please mute your mic when you're not speaking. Number two, as we go through the session, please send your questions on the chat. I will keep track of these questions and the panelists will lead off with them during the question and answer session. Then we will also be sharing a recording of the session as well as additional information with contact details of the organizations that are represented here, that is M-Shule and African Storybooks. So I hope that we get to learn from each other today, and most of all, we find a sustainable way of supporting our communities or the different people that we work with or through our organizations in making literacy and reading culture sustainable. So I will pass it on to Sara to continue leading us on the session. Sara?
Thanks so much, Phoebe. As Phoebe mentioned, my name is Sara. I'm the head of learning at M-Shule. And I just want to briefly take you through the agenda for today's session. So Dorcas and I will be talking about the challenges that our organizations are addressing, and then we'll share our solutions to those challenges. We'll tell you a little bit about the impact that our interventions have had, and then a little bit about what we've learned, especially during the pandemic. And we'll talk a bit about our sort of immediate future goals, and how we plan to achieve them. After that, we'll open the floor for Q&A, as Phoebe mentioned. So I just wanted to start off with sharing this quote with you that I think is really powerful and really illustrates the power of stories in relation to literacy and learning in general. So it says, telling stories is one of the most powerful means that leaders have to influence, teach, and inspire. What makes storytelling so effective for learning? For starters, storytelling forges connections among people and between people and ideas. Stories convey the culture, history, and values that you people and our families that bind. So just something to think about as we are moving through this discussion today and answering your questions about storytelling and learning and literacy. Great. So we just wanted to start by introducing our organizations to you. I'll hand it over to Dorcas to tell you a little bit about African Storybook.
So hello, my name is Dorcas. I work with African Storybook as Partner Development Coordinator for East and West Africa. I have been working with the initiative since its inception, that is in 2013, when we did our mapping, and then we went forward to launch the website with the storybooks. So I should maybe at this point say something about the African Storybook. Is that okay, Sara?
Yes, that's great.
Okay. Yeah, so the African Storybook, and SAIDI stands for the South African Institute for Distance Education. SAIDI works across sub-Saharan Africa, trying to transform education through partnerships mediated through technology. Now, the African Storybook, as I mentioned just a minute ago, was launched in 2014. And at that time, we had very few storybooks. I think we had about 120 storybooks on the website, 27 languages of Africa represented. The African Storybook's vision is open access to picture storybooks in the languages of Africa for children's literacy, enjoyment, and imagination. Without a firm foundation laid and a love for reading acquired in the first 3 years of schooling, children struggle to transit to the upper levels. And so for us at African Storybook, we are responding to this need. And our aim is to provide quantity and diverse storybooks that are context appropriate in the languages that children are familiar with to help them develop a love for reading as they go to school in the first 4 years of schooling. And to achieve this, we do it through partnerships. And so we have a clear strategy of how we build our partnerships. Now, African Storybook does not publish curriculum materials, but our resources are complementary to the curriculum. We also have guides, which we are updating at the moment to respond to the new developments of the website. And these guides, we believe, can help anyone, teachers, parents, and anyone else who uses our resources to use them effectively. So that's just briefly about African Storybook. I'll say a little more as we go along.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. That's really great to learn briefly about the challenge that African Storybook is responding to. So I want to tell you a little bit about Mschule as well. Mschule has responded to a similar challenge as African Storybook, and that is that access to learning materials and literacy materials and books in particular is very, very limited for a lot of people on the continent. And in connection to that, we know that it's very hard for people to get access to really high quality learning materials and knowledge building opportunities. So in response to this challenge, what Mschule has done is developed the first personalized mobile learning platform in Africa to connect learners and data all through SMS. So our platform works entirely via SMS. The platform uses artificial intelligence to deliver personalized learning support, support skill development and data collection tools. Then at Mschule, we analyze the data collected and share insights with stakeholders and partners to power better support. And by making this sort of all-in-one learning platform possible, even on the simplest feature phone, we hope to unlock opportunities for learning for everyone, not just in Africa, but across around the world. That's a little bit about what Mschule is doing. Dorcas, could you tell us a little bit about how you're helping at African Storybook to give learners access to storybooks that are contextualized and connect this to how that helps learners build literacy skills?
Thank you, Sara. So our solution lies in our publishing model. And the question we are answering is like how do you learn to play football without a ball? And so we relate this to reading. How can you learn to read without storybooks? And we don't just talk about one storybook, but several. So we are interested in quantities, in diversity, and in quality. So our digital publishing model is one that provides multilingual storybooks. So at the moment, the website has over 2,000 unique storybooks and over 6,000 translations and 222 languages of Africa represented. Our publishing license is the Creative Commons license, which means that people can access storybooks freely, and the only cost they will incur is the cost of, let's say, data, so to be able to access the website, or the printing cost. And all the storybooks are print ready. So when you are on the website and you click on download to print, the booklet will be, it's already set in the sense that you download and it will have rearranged the pages so that you print back to back and you have a booklet. You can do that as black and white. You can print and just staple the PDF and read. We have seen this happening. And also, the website has tools to enable anyone to contribute their own storybooks using the images that are on the website. We have thousands of images. So people can use these images to create their own storybooks. They can also use their own images like photographs or images drawn, or if it's an artist who has done the images, or source from the internet, openly licensed images and use them to create their own storybooks. They can also translate existing storybooks into languages that are needed. So for example, if I'm teaching children whose first language has no resources, and then I find African storybooks are in English or in French, I can translate that into the language of the children and use that so that children can learn from what they know. So our translations are now what we are talking about when we say 6,700 and plus storybooks are mostly from translation. So translation actually has a multiplier effect. And one example is we have a very simple story on the website called A Very Tall Man, which was written by a father and his son. This story has been translated over 58,000 times. And it's available in, I don't know how many languages. It has also been adapted to suit different contexts. And one example is that from a very simple story, we now have a math story which teaches math concepts. We have seen that teachers and lecturers and librarians contributing to the collection because some of them are working with children, and so they encourage the children to also contribute to the storybooks. And this is very important because we believe that reading and writing go hand in hand. And if you develop children's reading practices, you need also to develop their writing practices as well, and one feeds into the other. We have also storybooks donated from other initiatives that uphold open learning principles. So we have republished storybooks coming from other initiatives, and they have done the same with their own initiatives. So it is important for us to stimulate the agency of local people and communities, and that's why one of our aims is to build the capacity of the local writers who are aspiring to write, and artists who are aspiring to be professional artists, to be able to do this and help us generate resources in under-resourced contexts. So technology and openly licensing results in quantity, in diversity, and in quality, because where we don't know the language, we rely on the expertise of the people who speak the language to quality assure the storybooks in those languages. Now, lastly, our storybooks can be read on our Reader app, which is free. You can download it from App Store. And we consider this as a library in your pocket, because once you download and then you access the storybooks and download them onto the Reader, as many as you want, then you can read them offline. And then our other app is what we call the Storybook Maker app, which was a winner of winners in the Tech for Good this year. And so these ones help children to read and to write their own storybooks and to publish them offline. And then when they are connected to internet, they can just publish them onto the website. So this is how we are addressing the problem, and this is our solution. And we encourage people to use this because we have seen how it is affecting children and how fascinating it is for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. It's really nice to hear about an organization that's successfully improving children's access to storybooks, but also that's making them available, regardless of access to smartphones or internet connectivity, which we know is a really big challenge. M-Shule's solution is similar in some ways to African Storybook. Like I mentioned, we have a suite of SMS-based tools that we can use to support educational and training programs, to deliver quality learning resources, measure impact on performance, and build knowledge both for learners and organizations. And one of the things that we do at M-Shule is use story framing throughout all of our SMS-based content, and that's for both children and adults. And similar to what Dorcas mentioned, we know that people learn best when information is presented to them in a contextualized, relatable format, and that also demonstrates the application of the information that we want them to learn. And a story is one of those such formats. So each of our micro lessons at M-Shule begins with a story or a scenario that introduces the topic at hand. And this story is adapted to fit the specific topic, context, and audience that we are addressing with the content. And in addition, in order to create this content, we carry out user research and use this to inform tailored user profiles. We also make sure that the content we're creating contains more simple language in the beginning, at the start, and then gradually increases in complexity to support building of literacy skills. So aside from our general approach to content development, which uses a story framing, we also recently launched our Stories for Kenyan Learners project. And similar to African Storybook, we see this as sort of a mini library. So what we did at Mschule was we took 8 traditional African folktales and we digitized them into SMS format, targeted towards learners in grade 4 and class 5 across Kenya. Each story contains 10 SMS messages, which contain the story itself. It also has a practical application, which introduces the learner to a given element of the story creation process and encourages them to practice writing their own stories. And each story also includes a multiple choice question that encourages the learner to reflect on the moral purpose of the story and adds an element of interactivity to the content. A bit about how Mschule is addressing issues around literacy, around lack of reading culture and access to reading materials. And again, these materials can all be accessed on the simplest of feature phones. So just back to you, Dorcas, for a minute. Could you share with our guests a little bit about the impact that African Storybook has had to date?
So doing this, maybe sharing, I refer to some of our partners. On our website, we also publish what we call stories of use. And these are examples of how innovatively our partners are using the storybooks. So one example is our partner here in Kenya, which is working across, I think, 13 countries, that is Iktabu. Iktabu adapts our storybooks to suit children with disabilities. And we love this. We have seen some of the stories that have been converted into Kenya Sign Language. And this helps because the same resource can be used across board. We don't need to develop different ones. You can adapt what is existing. Another example is our community libraries. We have about 9 that we work with here in Kenya. And one example is the Kibera Library in Kibera. And over the COVID period, they used the storybooks on phones and loaned the phones to parents to use them with children at home to enable children continue reading because they could not access online learning. So this was a very important example for them to help them to still connect with education. And for those who couldn't afford the phones or access the phones, Then the library printed the storybooks and just went around and gave the storybooks to the kids in the village, in the slum area. Now, another example is two of our champions in Nigeria celebrated the International Day for the Girl Child by bringing together girls in northern Nigeria to write their own stories. And a lot of these girls had never got a voice to speak or to even talk about what they experienced. So they used the Storybook Maker app to create their own storybooks, to draw images and to publish. And one of the girls went ahead actually, and she won scholarships. Now she's got scholarships from the ministry because nobody knew about her. But now everybody knows about her and is going to go to the highest level of education as much as she wants. Another example is, for example, in Mombasa, one of our champions was taking the laptop loaded with the storybooks, and she was calling it door-to-door, service, and taking the stories to the villages, to the homes, to sit down and help children read during COVID. And one other example is one who called, she started off and she was calling it, hashtag, read for food. And this was also to help children read, but at the same time, collect food and bring home for the families during COVID. So these are examples of how innovatively our champions or our partners are using the storybooks to help children engage with reading, especially during these hard times, so that those who are unfortunate are not left behind. Now, a lot of the time, schools have government tablets, but many of them are not even aware of the fact that African Storybook exists and that they can access the storybooks on the Kenya Education Cloud. So one example here, we have a school that uses our storybooks on their tablets, and they ensure that the children have a library lesson each time they have a lesson on the timetable. They don't skip it. And one of the teachers was talking about how reading African storybooks has helped children improve in their writing. And she attributes this to using African Storybook, because one of the comments she made was that children were so excited and they were wondering how you can just write a story from the ordinary things that happen. So our storybooks are giving children ideas of how to write simply and how to turn the ordinary experiences into storybooks. And some of them are just knowing that you can put text and images together to form a story. And then the last example I share, or second, or at least not the last one, is an example of our library, our partner library, Meru, who worked with children and created storybooks they call Creative Kids Short Stories. They made the stories into a collection and then printed the storybooks and gave a copy to each child who participated and each school that sent a child to participate. And this is encouraging so many of them to want to write, because some of them have ideas, but just the limitations of schooling and the fact that school has very little time, to engage with a lot of writing and reading. So this is an example where working together with community libraries helps the schools to also encourage children to read more and to write more. And lastly, in Malawi, one of our champions there noticed that children were spending a lot of time in video rooms, those videos in the villages during the lockdown. And so when he started using the African Storybook, he had a laptop and he had a tablet. And so he would go into the village and bring the children in, and then they will sit down and read. And for many of them, he says, they had never engaged with technology. So it was the first time for them to interact with technology and to read on a device. And so these are some of the examples of impact. And so far, we would say from the reports we've received from our champions and our other partners, we have reached over 1.6 million children. And these are reports we've received. Many others we don't receive because they are accessing our storybooks offline, or some of the partners don't report on the extent of use. So just what we have is over 1.6 million children and over 7,000 teachers who have benefited from using African Storybook. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Dorcas. That is really, really inspiring. It sounds like African Storybook has made some really deep and very wide impact as well across a range of different communities. A little bit about Mschule's impact through our story-based content, which I mentioned previously. Mschule has reached about 8,000 households throughout Kenya currently. And our content covers a really wide range of topics. So we have everything from financial literacy to social accountability, health and hygiene, career guidance for young people, lesson planning for teachers, just to name a few. And these all contain these contextualized stories that have helped our learners to remember and apply what they have learned. In addition to that, the feedback that we received from our recent Stories for Kenyan Learners project, so our sort of mini library, was really encouraging and demonstrated how a project like this can support literacy skills and the development of a reading culture, even when schools are closed, like during the pandemic. So for example, some of the feedback we received from parents is that they really liked that whenever their child wanted to read, no matter when it was, they could simply access stories on the parent's phone without even having to leave home, which was really important during the height of the pandemic. They also highlighted the fact that their children seemed more confident in their reading ability, which we know in and of itself can lead to improved literacy skills. After independently going through the stories in the Mschule library at their own pace. And finally, another bit of feedback parents shared was that after going through just these 8 stories, their children could accurately summarize the stories and even retell them to their friends, which boosted, their own confidence and literacy skills, but also extended the reach of the project. So hopefully exponentially increased literacy skills exponentially to a wider group than who the stories were piloted with specifically. So a little snapshot of the impact that we've had at Mschule in this particular context. And then lastly, Dorcas, we would love for you to share a bit about what you've learned as an organization, and especially during and throughout the COVID pandemic.
So one of the things we continue to learn is the relevance of digital literacy resources, and the fact that not just their relevance, but how affordable and how accessible they are. So this is something that we realize that we can't shy away from using technology because people don't have connectivity or they don't have power, but we just need to have the resources there. And the importance of digital literacy or openly licensed, digitized resources is that they'll always be there, and you'll never run out of them, or they'll never be out of print. So this is important, and this has come to the fore because of COVID, where people are searching, and as they do, they are stumbling on African Storybook, and they are getting in touch, and they're getting excited and using them. So it is important to have resources available, not just for those who are privileged, but for everybody. And we realize that a lot of the time, resources are not available in the languages that marginalized children can access and read. And so this is also is something we are learning to ensure that we avail the storybooks in the marginalized languages or the languages that are underrepresented. Because we have seen communities or organizations reaching out to us and asking if we have storybooks in a particular language, because they want to have parents support their children during lockdowns, but parents can only read in those languages and not the languages of wider communication. So this is something we are learning, and it's something we are taking forward, that we need to avail resources in as many languages of Africa as possible, particularly those that are underrepresented. Another thing is that openly licensed matters. We are learning this more and more. And whereas people can have a phone, but if with their phone, they can access these resources. So openly licensed is important. And we also learning that people are acknowledging that open license resources are quality and you can make them quality. So we are encouraging people to use this and to share their experiences. And the other thing is that, which is very important, is partnerships. Without partnerships, you can't really get anywhere, or you can't go far. So we are getting partners reaching out to us, and we're also seeking them out so that we can have a wider impact and reach as many people as possible. And lastly, our story writing workshops, where we brought people together to write and generate new storybooks, were always done in a workshop setup, face to face. But this is not possible anymore. But it hasn't stopped us from developing new storybooks. We have done this and we have gone virtually online. And so far we are running a story writing workshop for South Africa. And this is happening virtually. It's happening around, what we call the STEM heroes or heroines or people who have developed to STEM, and it's mostly for South Africa. But I'll say something about going forward, what we are planning on doing. And then the importance of engaging children in reading and writing. And so we have seen our apps come in handy. Our reader, which, as I said, is like a library in your pocket, and our story maker, like a publisher in your pocket. And this, we have seen this, when children start using the story maker to write, they don't want to stop. It ignites their imagination. They want to engage with technology, and they want to learn to put text and images together to come up with a story that can be read by other people. So these are some of the things. And in relation to this, I just want to say a big thank you to some of our partners and some of our champions. I think I've seen one or two in this webinar. So a very big thank you for supporting African Storybook, for advocating and promoting its use. And please continue doing so and to continue sharing your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. I think at Mschule, one of our learnings has been very similar, and that is that, the power of stories and storytelling to support literacy, skill building, and even just learning in general is truly incredible and far-reaching. Another thing that, especially this period during the COVID, is that by combining various elements from Mschule's toolkit, such as providing targeted access to learning content, driving awareness in parents and students about programs that we're running, tracking qualitative feedback on our programs and content, all of this together really enhances the success of everything we do and each product we develop or intervention that we implement. So lastly, I just want to throw out to Dorcas the question of what's next? What's next for African Storybook? What are your sort of immediate short-term goals, and what kinds of resources or support do you need to get there?
So going forward, we are identifying about 4 areas that we want to focus on. And I've briefly mentioned STEM. We are planning on creating a corpus of STEM storybooks with activities to help parents, to help teachers. We might develop short guides or maybe just activities at the end of the storybooks so that it can help teachers to engage with the children and help them to read more. So STEM storybooks, because I think we have a lot of other storybooks on the website. And then the other second part or second area we want to concentrate on is underrepresented languages. And this would include marginalized communities and groups. So marginalized might include women or communities that are overlooked, maybe children or persons with disabilities and people like that, so that we can develop and have storybooks about these languages or in these languages that are underrepresented and about these marginalized groups. Then the third one is expanding our work with community libraries to encourage them to use our apps, that is the African Storybook Reader app and the African Storybook Maker. And in this category, we also work with people we call champions. These are individuals who represent their own communities in their own countries. So we want to expand on this because we have seen the great work they do in helping the communities to value and to support children's literacy. And then the last area that we want to take forward is to update and refine our African Storybook tools and to promote their use. But to achieve this, of course, we need resources. We are a very small team. I actually am the only one who is full-time on African Storybook. My colleagues are doing just time because of financial resources. So when we work with our champions, we support them with a very small stipend because they might need to buy data, they might need to download the storybooks on the devices, etc. So we give them a very small stipend. And then they can also bulk print. If we had resources, we might print in bulk, which is very cheap, and help people who face challenges of connectivity and electricity to still be able to read. We also would like to do audio stories, but as I said, we don't have resources. We don't have the human resources or the financial resources to do that. And lastly, we would like to reach out to more organizations to work with them, to help them and support their capacities to use African Storybook tools. So this is what we are planning on doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorcas, for sharing that. It's really exciting to hear what your plans are and what you'll be working on. In terms of what's next for Mschule, we're actively looking to bring new partners on board to support literacy development, but also to support skill building in a number of other areas, both for children and adults. And we are also interested in curating high quality content for our SMS platform from different stakeholders across the education ecosystem. And this includes expanding our story library to include things like stories from different genres, as well as potentially stories in different languages. Much of our existing content has been translated across a number of different languages. So that's something else we are also interested in. So thank you so much for Dorcas for sharing all of this fantastic information. I see that some people in the chat have requested the link so they can download the apps that you mentioned, which is great. And I will at this time hand it back over to Phoebe to field the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Sara and Dorcas. You have addressed a lot of things that a lot of our participants had raised in the registration forms. But I know one of the things that had been asked was in terms of getting children who are struggling to read or who have issues with reading, read. So I think I'll start with you, Dorcas. Dorcas, how would you recommend, and rather, how can children who have reading problems be supported? And I think in terms of the problems that we have here, what has been mentioned, one is access to materials, those who have irregular reading habits, and those who generally do not just like reading as an act itself. Dorcas?
Thank you so much. Maybe I speak like a teacher I am. And I taught for 18 years as a high school teacher, and I had struggling learners, I was teaching English, I was teaching Kiswahili, and often I would switch from Kiswahili to English when I was teaching Kiswahili, and I would teach, when I was teaching English, I would use Kiswahili. Often a child needs to be able to understand what you are talking about. And in this case, if you are teaching maybe young learners, you could also use images. In our African storybook, you can adapt a story, take out the text and leave the images. And picture reading is very important. So a child can start from there, engage with the images, look at them and ask and help them to talk about what they see in the image. And just say, look, what do you see here? You open the first page and let them talk about that image. And in talking about that image, it's like they're actually reading the image. And then from there, you can move on to now, can you write what you're saying? And they can put down what they're talking about in writing. And then when they see that it's actually shaping up what they are talking about or what they are seeing, the image shapes up into a story. Then now you can give them a very simple story. On our website, we have storybooks from level 1 to level 5. Now, level 1 is very simple. Often they have one sentence or one word. The sentences are very simple. The language is it's a very low language, so you don't go up high there. So you can expose them to that picture reading and then move on to the very simple ones, short stories, because if you give a child who is struggling at that 5-page story, they are going to be put off. Give them 8, even 6, even 2 at a time. So take them, pole. I'll give you an example. When I was teaching, I taught a girl who had come from Ethiopia as a refugee, and she was in Form 2. This girl had no Kiswahili. He couldn't talk, she couldn't read. But because Kiswahili is a subject here in Kenya, she had to do the exam. But I worked with her systematically, and at the end of 3 years, she was able to sit the exam and score a C+. And it was mainly switching from English to Kiswahili, helping her talk about what she wants to say to me in Kiswahili, speak to me in English, and then I'll take it back into Kiswahili. And after a while, she was able to pick. And children, you just have to find what makes them tick. You got to, if they don't want to read, if they want to talk, let them talk. If they want to just engage with the images, give them the images, and you'll be surprised. So you can take them, give them different exercises, give them a different story. If you are reading one that is long, give them a shorter one, if you can afford. And this is where African Storybook comes in handy. If you can print various storybooks of varying levels and give them during library lesson, let them choose which one they want to read. Then they will pick the one they want to engage with. I think that's all I can say now.
Dorcas, that is really good. So what you're telling us is, one, we need to identify the ability of that learner and the medium of preference, not to be very fixed in our ways. And in doing so, relate the different tools that we have when it comes to learning, be it pictorial, be it audio, if they want to speak at the same time, or if they're reading, probably build up on that, which is also something that I know we do at M-Shule in terms of, as Sara said, starting with the basics, then build up on that as we continue to proficiency. Sara, is there anything else you'd like to add on that?
Just before Sara says, also let's not forget about our languages. Often we think our languages are barriers, but our languages are resources. I have seen a teacher in a nomadic community use the local language, and he told me at the end of term 1, the children who were never able to read were able to read, because what he did is he took African storybook titles that were available in 3 languages. So the same title available in the mother tongue, in Kiswahili and in English. And he started with the mother tongue book. Then when they were confident, he gave them the Kiswahili. When the confidence was a little higher, he gave them the English. And he says the head teacher was asking him what he did, that now the kids were all reading. So let's use our languages. They are resources, they're not hindrances. They can help a child, lose the fear of reading and just know that they can actually read, can pronounce words and read. Thanks.
Yeah, Dorcas, that's a really powerful example of scaffolding and how it can support learners in the classroom. And just to add to Dorcas's answer, I think one of the strengths of M-Schule's platform and content is that it gives learners agency. So oftentimes you find that reading only happens in school. And that could be for a number of reasons. That could be because it's associated with academics. It could be because there aren't storybooks at home. It could be because parents aren't encouraging independent reading, whatever the reason. When children are able to access our storybooks on the parent's phone at home, they can go through them at their own pace, and they can choose which story they want to read, and it's not connected to school, which is why it's more in story form and less in lesson form. We don't want children to feel like reading stories is only for academics, is only for in-school time. So I hope that by giving them that agency to choose what they want to read, when they want to read it, and at what pace they want to read it, they can read 2 out of 10 SMS messages of a story at a time and come back to it later. We hope that builds reading confidence and really builds that love of reading and that reading culture where they don't feel like they're pressured to read. And then another thing another way that our platform helps learners, and especially struggling learners, is that we always encourage parents to get involved with their children's reading on the phone. So we know the child is typically using a parent's phone to access these stories, and they're very short. Remember, 10 SMS messages, 160 characters per message. It's a pretty quick read. So what we hope is that by supporting parents through onboarding and support messaging, that we can get parents to sit down with their child for 5 or 10 minutes, help them go through this story if they're struggling, and then again use that as a scaffolding like Dorcas talked about. So parent sits with the child and reads, eventually the child builds up their skills and confidence, and the parent is then able to step away and the child can read on their own.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Sara and Dorcas. And Sara, you've touched on something that that had also been asked in terms of in the involvement of parents when it comes to supporting their learners. But I'll let you also add something else, because the other thing that has been asked is how do we get learners who probably have, yes, some of access to these resources, but their parents come from an illiterate background. What would be one way that we probably, or what are some of the ways that we could explore to support this kind of learning?
One way I've seen happening is, like I mentioned, I think a while ago, about the relationship between schools and community libraries. And this for me happened when the library, as I said, was loaning the phones, mobile phones, to the parents, and they'll bring the parent to the library and show them how to help, even if the parent didn't know how to read. But they will say, look, when your child takes the phone, at least make sure they are reading, look at the phone and see what they're doing. And what they did with the phones was they formatted them in such a way that the child would not access anything else other than the storybooks that were loaded on the reader. So that was so that they wouldn't go playing around with something else, the way they could do that. So they would help the parent and say, look, even if you can't read, but just remind the child to take the phone, to open and to sit down and let them read. So that alone, the fact that the parent is interested and is there and is asking the child and saying, are you reading? Have you done your reading today? That alone is helpful. Because, I mean, there are many parents who are not able to read, but they are interested in their children's schooling. And the best way they can do that is just to encourage them and say, please read, make sure I've done your schoolwork, make sure I've done your reading today. And if they can just sit down and just be there as the child is reading. And I say this because there's one example of a storybook on our website where a child hates school. When he goes, he hides and goes around the house and comes back. And then eventually they discover he hasn't been going to school. And then when the father talks to him and says, why don't you do your schoolwork? And he says, it's boring. Dad, it is boring. Reading's boring. And then the father says, how about if I do it with you? And so the father offers to sit with the boy so that he can do his homework. And although the father wasn't doing his homework, he was just sitting with him and giving him company. So just creating that space where the parent shows interest in the child's reading will make the child know that that exercise or that activity is important for their schooling. And it goes a long way, rather than when it's just left to them to remember, and sometimes they don't do it, or they're given too much work and they don't remember to do it. So just that support, because if they can't read, they can't read, but they can support them to read by sitting with them and encouraging them.
Thank you, Dorcas. Sara?
Yeah, I think, you know, my response is very similar to what Dorcas talked about, only to add that one of the benefits, I think, of offering access to stories on a feature phone, so your very, very basic non-smartphone, is that we've found at Mschule that children as young as 4 actually navigate a feature without even being able to read. So even if you know, the parents are illiterate, or there's no one around that can help the child, even very, very young children can navigate to a story on a feature phone, and even better if the parent, like Dorcas said, can sit with the child and help them to, you know, just motivate them through the process of going through a story. A lot of our stories are very simple, so we expect that even children in lower primary grades can go through them on their own. But like Dorcas said, you know, one of the things we try to do is to get parents on board in any way possible. That doesn't have to be helping their child read, but it could just be providing that physical presence in terms of support. And you know, we do that through sensitization and onboarding, SMS messaging alongside the programs that we run.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that addition, Sara. Ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate your participation in this session. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're not able to continue addressing all of the questions that had been raised, but please feel free to send us any question that will come up, and we'll pass it on to the speaker. And most of all, we'll share a link of this recording with you, as well as the speaker's organization. So Dorcas and Sara, I want to thank you for what you have said. First of all, we can use the different resources that we have. These are assets to promote literacy amongst our children, the different levels of individuals that we actually have in our society. So with that said, again, thank you very much, everyone, and have a lovely remainder of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.